Alrighty, here's Grandpa Frank again, and we're in the Gospel of John, King James Version. This is chapter 9, and we're doing a commentary. Chapter 9. And as Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, Neither had this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground, and made clay of the spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay, and said unto him, Go, wash in the pool of Siloam, which is by interpretation sent. He went his way therefore, and washed, and came seeing. The neighbors therefore, and they which before had seen him, that he was blind, said, Is not this he that sat and begged? Some said, This is he. Others said, He is like him. But he said, I am. Therefore said they unto him, How were thine eyes opened? He answered and said, A man that is called Jesus made clay, and anointed mine eyes, and said unto me, Go to the pool of Siloam, and wash. I went and washed, and I received sight. Then said they unto him, Well, where is he? He said, I know not. They brought to the Pharisees him that aforetime was blind. It was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Then again the Pharisees also asked him how he had received the sight. He said unto them, He put clay upon mine eyes, I washed, and do see. Therefore some said of the Pharisees, This man is not of God, because he keepeth not the Sabbath day. Others said, How can a man that is a sinner, do such miracles? And there was a division among them. They say unto the blind man again, What sayest thou of him, that he hath opened thine eyes? He said, He is a prophet. But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind, and received his sight, until they called the parents of him that had received his sight. And they asked them, saying, Is this your son, who ye say was born blind? How then doth he now see? His parents answered them and said, We know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But by what means he now seeth, we know not, or who hath opened his eyes, we know not. He is of age, ask him, he shall speak for himself. These words spake his parents because they feared the Jews. For the Jews had agreed already that if any man did confess that he was Christ, he should be put out of the synagogue. Therefore said his parents, He is of age, ask him. Then again called they the man that was born blind, and said unto him, Give God the praise. We know that this man is a sinner. He answered and said, Whether he be a sinner or no, I know not. One thing I know, that whereas I was blind, now I see. Then said they to him again, What did he to thee? How opened he thine eyes? He answered them, I have told you already, and you did not hear. Wherefore would ye hear it again? Will you also be his disciples? Then they reviled him and said, Thou art his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. We know that God spake unto Moses. As for this fellow, we know not from whence he is. The man answered and said unto them, Why, herein is a marvelous thing, that you know not from whence he is, and yet he hath opened mine eyes. Now we know that God heareth not sinners, but if any man be a worshipper of God, and doeth his will, him he heareth. Since the world began, was it not heard that any man opened the eyes of one that was born blind? If this man were not of God, he could do nothing. They answered and said unto him, Thou wast altogether born in sins, and dost thou teach us? And they cast him out. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him, he saith unto him, Dost thou believe on the Son of God? He answered and said, Who is he, Lord, that I might believe on him? And Jesus saith unto him, Thou hast both seen him, and it is he that talketh with thee. And he said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. And Jesus said, For judgment I am come into the world, that they which see not might see, and that they which see might be made blind. Some of the Pharisees which were with him heard these words, and saith unto him, Are we blind? Jesus saith unto them, If you were blind, you should have no sin. But now ye say, We see, therefore your sin remaineth. Okay, usually most of these chapters are broken up into sections, but this is the whole story right here in this one chapter. And I'm going to go back to the very beginning, where Jesus encounters the man that was born blind. In verse 2, his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? That is the question many people ask when there is a challenge that they don't understand. For example, my son was born with many challenges, many physical challenges. And as young parents, as young Christians, we had a hard time. We had a hard time understanding what was happening, why it was happening, and the question we asked ourselves, who sinned? Did we sin? What sin did we commit? And how can we rectify that? And we prayed for forgiveness of sin, and we thought of, because that's the natural thing to think of. You think, okay, something happened. There's something wrong with this child. He's not as perfect as we had hoped for, and you're thinking, okay, we're being punished. We did a sin, but who sinned? And that's the natural thought of the disciples. But look at what Jesus says in verse 3. Jesus answered, Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. When we encounter a child, perhaps one with autism, perhaps one with a speech deformity, perhaps one with a physical challenge, and it's easy to think, that it's a result of sin. But no, sometimes God allows it for a purpose, for a reason, so that his work would be manifest through that child. And many times we think of these special children who have these challenges as their angel children. I've heard it mentioned many times. So something to consider, that even though a child is blind or halt or dumb or whatever challenge he has, it's not necessarily because of sin. It's because God has a special purpose for that child and will be manifest in the life of that child. And as parents, taking care of this child, if we have faith and believe and a lot of patience, and sometimes I think that's the key right there, having a lot of patience, God will turn this around to something great and powerful. So this whole discourse comes, this man who was blind now receives sight. And he's brought to the Pharisees, to the religious leaders, and again, there's a division. Some say that, well, if again, it happened on the Sabbath. That's key right there, the Sabbath, because the religious leaders had very strict rules and regulations about what can and cannot occur on the Sabbath. Jesus is saying, no, you guys totally misunderstand what the Sabbath is all about. Is a time of rest. But that doesn't mean that good things cannot happen. And he's going to give some very solid examples of that in chapters to come. But right here, again, it's the challenge because the religious leaders have rules and regulations as to what can and cannot happen on the Sabbath. Jesus says, forget all of that. That's not what the scripture says the Sabbath is about. He goes and he heals this man. So the religious leaders are split. The miracle happened. They recognize the miracle happened. So the miracle came because a righteous man, a man of God, a prophet, came and healed him. And on the other side, you have, well, how can a miracle happen which is contrary or breaking the Sabbath? So there's that division. But it's breaking the rules of the Sabbath according to the religious leaders. They have their rules and regulations and traditions and all of this. So there's this big brouhaha, even to the point where, and knowing anything having to do with Jesus, that they were totally against. and it sounds like some of our political parties here. And if anybody proclaimed that it was Jesus or some sort of miracle, or that he was the prophet or Messiah, that they would be kicked out. And so the parents, when they came to testify, yes, he's our son. Yes, he was born blind. How he could see, we don't know. He is of age. Ask him. All right. So when the Pharisees again asked him, you know, being a simple person, he's saying, you're asking me again. I already told you how I got healed. Why do you want to hear it again? Is it possible you guys want to be his disciples? That irritated the religious leaders so much that, we're not his disciples, we're disciples of Moses. And so they kicked him out. They cast him out of the synagogue. And Jesus later comes across him and talks to the man and says, let's see, where is it? Verse 35. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him, he said unto him, Dost thou believe on the Son of God? And he answered and said, Well, who is he, Lord, that I might believe in him? Okay, so Jesus reveals himself to the man who was born blind. And because he was blind, he has a little bit of spiritual insight. So he knows, well, hey, my eyes were healed. This is a miracle. This must be of God. That's the only thing I can think of. So he was open to receiving the message from Jesus. The religious leaders, they were overhearing and they couldn't understand this. Because you're blind, now you see. How does it? Verse 39. For judgment I am come into the world, that they which see not might see, and they which see might be made blind. And the Pharisees which were with him heard these. Are we blind also? And Jesus said, If you were blind, you should have no sin. But now you say, We see. Therefore your sin remaineth. Because they did not see. They could not spiritually see. Jesus is talking in spiritual terms. The blind man who now sees picked that up, and now he believes. The religious leaders, the Pharisees, cannot, because even though supposedly they're teachers of the law, they don't see the spiritual side of the law. And so because of that, because they're blinded with their traditions and their rules and their regulations, they totally miss what the scripture is talking about. It's talking about spiritual things there. All right, so I'm going to stop right here. Ciao.